This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Christopher Mitchell, 212th Trooper, Sylar 1610, Carmen CJ, Rune Scribble, and Legendary Ray Ray. Once again, we find our heroes on the road, having said goodbye to Morty, and after a comfortable night in the Pokemon Center, set off for Olivine City, as this had been the gym leader's recommendation when faced with the choice of going west to the port town or east towards Mahogany. Trusting Morty not to steer them wrong, the friends make their way down Route 38, with this giving them some time to simply enjoy the countryside, as after Goldenrod and Critique, this feels more like the sort of rural environment Ash and Bugsy had grown up in. Even Domino is excited to Pokemon watch, as according to her, this and Route 39 are the only places in all of Johto where Tauros and Miltank can be found in the wild. Remembering how powerful Whitney's Miltank was, Ash just says he hopes that they don't have to battle a bunch of them at once, though grinning gleefully, Domino replies that she isn't worried about that at all. Having a feeling he knows why, Bugsy questions this, to which the blonde girl chirpily replies because she knows he and Ash will protect her, causing the Ravenhead youth to facefall, while the bug specialist sighs that he figured. However, as it turns out, Domino will not be the only girl to cause Ash stress in the days to come, as when the trio arrive on Route 39 and decide to stop off at the Moo Moo farm for a slice of their world-famous Moo Moo cheesecake and a couple of milkshakes, they come across Lyra, who appears to be mucking out the stables, with Ash questioning what she's doing here. Evidently looking for any excuse to stop working, the hat-clad girl bounds out of the stable and up to the group where she laughingly explains that she may have ordered a few more Moo Moo Milk ice creams than she could strictly speaking afford to pay for, so now she's working off her debt. Laughing along with her, Ash asks if she's gotten any stronger since they last battled, to which Lyra smirks that she sure has. In fact, she challenges him to a battle, and if she wins, he has to do the rest of her jobs around the farm. As the pragmatist of the group, Bugsy goes to ask what Ash gets if he wins, since it would be foolish to make such a gamble if he doesn't stand to gain anything. Though, before he can, the other boy has already agreed since he's always keen to battle. Wanting to get away from the farm as quickly as possible, Lyra proposes a simple 1v1 before unveiling her newly evolved Bayleaf, or wanting to give her a chance at redemption after the Morty battle, Ash picks Ledian. At this site, Lyra calls for timeout, since she wants to swap Pokemon, though having had quite enough of her childish attitude, Bugsy points out that wasn't it her who once said a trainer shouldn't swap just because they're going to lose? With a pout, Lyra retorts that it's rude to throw someone's words back at them, though all the same she does not switch, telling Bayleaf to use Vine Whip. In response, Ash's Ledian counter with Mach Punch, seeing the 4/5 of the 5-star Pokemon slap against the vines and drive them back. Looking stunned and appalled that Ash would dare to fight back, Lyra next orders her starter to close in for a tackle, though remembering this from their last battle, the Ravenhead youth swiftly commands his Pokemon to fly out of the way then come back for a bug bite. Likewise remembering how tasty its leaf was as a Chikorita, the gluttonous bug is eager to try the new Bayleaf flavor, demonstrating the full extent of her aerial prowess as she flies quite literal circles around the grass type, before coming in for a super effective chomp. Letting out joint squeals of horror, Lyra and Bayleaf try desperately to dislodge this little pest, though knowing nothing will stand between Ledian and her food, Ash has her hold on tight with more bug bites, in order the bug flyer is happy to obey as she keeps munching her way through the starter's head leaf. As a result, it is not long before Bayleaf begins to show signs of flagging, and seeing this, Ash gives his final instruction, to let go of the leaf and give a final Mach Punch to its skull. Truthfully, Ledian is reluctant to heed this order, as she's quite enjoying this snack, though she supposes all the thrashing is bad for her digestion, so she can just knock the grass dino out now, then finish eating once it's unconscious. With this resolve, Ledian lets go as told. Then, just as Bayleaf has a moment of confusion at having seemingly succeeded, she dive bombs, striking true with all her fists and putting spirals into its eyes. At this sight, Ash lets out a cheer of joy and praises Ledian for doing such a good job, though in contrast, Lyra is not happy at all, whining that he's a stinky poopy meanie jerk with no friends. Looking rather bewildered by this claim, Ash points out he has several friends right here, indicating Bugsy, Domino, Voltorb, and Ledian, before snarkily adding that Lyra's one to talk about stinking, since she doesn't exactly smell like a Roselli after what she's been doing in those stables. Surprisingly, the ponytailed girl does not protest this, instead dropping to her knees and wailing that it's true. She does stink, both literally and as a trainer. Feeling rather bad for making his rival cry, Ash rushes in and apologizes while protesting that she doesn't stink as a trainer, she just... Though what exactly he was about to say no one will ever know. As having another of her characteristic demeanor swaps, she cheekily beams up at him that if he's really sorry then he can make it up to her by buying her some cheesecake, and ice cream, oh and a milkshake too. Rather put off by this reaction, Ash turns back to his friends, hoping they can get him out of this bind he's seemingly walked into, though this is only met by matching looks from Bugsy and Domino that say, "Sorry pal, but I think you've been played." As one would expect, this blunder proves rather taxing on Ash's wallet, though it is not all bad, as once they're seated at the farmhouse cafe enjoying their meal, Lyra has a sudden brainwave and asks the boy how the egg her grandparents gave him is doing. Pulling it out from his backpack, Ash admits that he's not really sure since it's taken a really long time to hatch, though lately it's been shaking a bit and he's not really sure if that's good or bad. Smirking smugly, Lyra states that of course it's good, since it means the Pokemon inside it is almost ready to come out, with this setting stars in the boy's eyes as he asks if she's serious. Still in that haughty tone, Lyra grins that she sure is, reminding him that she hatched her Marill along with loads of other Pokemon at her grandparents' daycare center. In fact, she's pretty sure she could make it hatch right now if he wanted. Beaming broadly, Ash begs her to do it, since he can't wait to meet his new Pokemon friend. Though what she says in response is something he never would have guessed in a million years, as she barks him to get up and start doing squats while holding the egg. More than a little startled, Ash asks if she's sure about this, though when she asks if he wants his egg to hatch or not, he concedes, standing up in the middle of the cafe and beginning a series of squats with the rattling egg clutched to his chest. Whether due to exertion or embarrassment, this quickly causes him to break out in a sweat, though this is seemingly what Lyra wants, as she encourages him to keep going, while pointing out that the egg has begun shaking in time with his squats. Looking down, Ash is pleasantly surprised to see that this is true, though what comes less of a pleasant shock is when Lyra uses this to snatch his cap off his head. In a mix of annoyance and confusion, the raven-haired boy demands to know what she did that for. Though unabashed by his rebuke, the brunette simply replies, "this," as she flicks several drops of sweat that have been forming on his hat onto the egg. As soon as these droplets of perspiration hit its shell, the Pokemon egg bursts into bright light, with everyone in the restaurant staring in fascination, though none more so than Ash, who watches in awe as the object in his arms transforms into a small lilac and brown Pokemon with a crested head. Beaming proudly, Lyra then explains this is a Tyrogue, and as a fighting type, it responds to the sort of body heat and perspiration brought about through physical exercise, so we just need a little bit of that to coax it out of its shell. In spite of what a pain in the butt his rival can sometimes be, Ash can't help but gush that it's so amazing she knew all that off the top of her head, to which Lyra grins that yeah, she's pretty great. However, this bubble is promptly burst by Domino, who innocently points out that as a Pokemon watcher, she couldn't help but observe how much the other girl was sweating during that whole exchange, so she's pretty sure that was less knowledge and more of a lucky guess on Lyra's part. Flaring up this assertion, the ponytailed girl protests that she did too know all that stuff, though when Domino sweetly asks how certain she was that her plan would work, Lyra's answer comes out as a mumble that sounds awfully like 40%? Nonetheless, Tyrogue is here now, and that is what matters, with Ash adopting a soft cooing voice as he welcomes it into the world. At this sound, the baby fighting type opens its yellow eyes, and upon catching sight of the boy, gives him a surprisingly curt and serious nod for an infant. As it turns out, this is Tyrogue's personality to a T, as when Ash and friends get back on the road, the black-haired boy spends much of the following days trying to get to know the Scuffle Pokemon and get acclimated to his team. Through this, he comes to quickly learn that it is a deeply focused and driven Pokemon, choosing to spend any free time it has outside its level ball either exercising or in an almost meditative level of deep thought, to the point where Ash wonders if this is what it was doing in its egg that made it stay in there so long. This does give it a somewhat surly or standoffish demeanor, especially when it comes to Ash's other Pokemon, as when they're all together during meals or other relaxation times, it doesn't really engage with the others, even spurning Voltorb and Totodile's offers to play in favor of its solitary pursuits, namely shadowboxing. Thankfully, this hobby does at least give Ash an inroad to bond with his newest catch, as seeing how strong its warrior spirit is, the boy spends much of their time together talking to it about battles, both the ones he and the rest of his team have had, and the ones to come that he hopes it will join them in. During these discussions, some of Tyrogue's youthful excitement does shine through the stoicism, as while it remains deeply devoted to its training, there is a passion there that speaks of a true love for battling, and a desire to experience it as soon as possible. And speaking of battling, it is around this time that Ash must prepare himself for his next major one, as he and his friends finally arrive in Olivine City. After a quick stop off at the Pokemon Center to ensure that everyone is fighting fit and that Tyrogue is healthy, since this is Ash's first chance to get looked at by a medical professional, the raven-haired boy sets off for the gym, finding it to be a trapezoidal building whose interior is quite similar to the Goldenrod gym in its simplicity. At the far end of this open space stands a young woman who introduces herself as Jasmine, the gym leader, with this making Ash grin, as he states that he hoped so, since he's here to challenge her to a battle. Due to being earlier in the timeline, around the point Ash would be challenging Koga and Cannon, Sparkle the Ampharos is not sick, meaning Jasmine has no reason to refuse this challenge, though this is not the only change to come from being earlier, as currently, Jasmine is still a rock-type specialist, with her first Pokemon Corsola reflecting this. Surmising from its coral appearance that it is a water type, Ash knows just the Pokemon to choose for this battle, looking to his starter and asking if he feels like helping him out. Rolling forward with a determined look on his face, Voltorb lets out a puff of steam that the boy chooses to interpret as yes, while from the sidelines, Janina the referee announces that this battle will be a 2-on-2, before calling for the first match to begin. Admittedly, this isn't much of a battle, as one quad effective Razor Leaf from Voltorb is enough to leave Corsola looking half ready to throw in the towel. Nonetheless, Jasmine has it used Recover to regain some of its strength, before retaliating with a spike cannon that the Sphere Pokemon must roll to avoid. However, in doing so, he starts gaining the first bit of kinetic energy, and knowing what his partner is thinking, Ash tells Voltorb to keep zigzagging its way closer and closer towards Corsola. Assuming they're building up for a rollout or something similar, Jasmine yells for her friend to use Harden between shots of spike cannon, though as she will soon learn, this is a waste of effort, as when Voltorb successfully weaves his way around each of the shots and comes face to face with a Coral Pokemon, he fires a point-blank Thunderbolt that it has done little to protect itself from. This second super effective hit in a row is enough to knock Corsola out cold, though as Jasmine is quick to point out, this was just a warm-up, as she next brings forth her ace Onix. At the sight of the stone serpent, Ash feels a pit form in his stomach, since he's never fought anything that large before, though when he looks down at Voltorb, the grass electric type gives him another confident little puff of smoke, with this going a long way towards helping him find his resolve, since if his partner believes they can do this, then so does he. Turning his gaze towards Onix once more, Ash cries for Voltorb to fire off a Razor Leaf, with this dealing quite effective damage as the leaves bury themselves in the Goliath's joints, causing it to bellow with pain. However, in doing so, this also makes it madder, which in turn makes it stronger, as when Onix lashes out with Iron Tail, Voltorb is unable to do more than look shocked before he is swept up and sent crashing into the back wall. Hearing the sound of splintering wood amidst this collision, Ash winces, though when he calls out to see if his buddy is okay, Voltorb rolls back onto the field with that same determined look in his eyes. Unfortunately, with that determination also comes a lot of injuries, so that Ash briefly wishes his starter knew Recover like Corsola, though having learned from his grandfather long ago that wishing without action is a recipe for disappointment, he instead puts his focus back towards the battle as he calls for Voltorb to use another Razor Leaf. Being smart enough not to fall for the same trick twice, Jasmine counters this with Dig, having Onix dive underground to avoid the leaves before the ground around Voltorb begins to cave in. Vainly, Ash urges his partner to get out of there, but it is already too late, as the incline is too steep, meaning Voltorb can do little as Onix bursts up from beneath him and slams him into the ceiling. Were that not bad enough, when the Sphere Pokemon begins falling back towards the battlefield, Onix swats him like a tennis ball mid-serve, and knowing this is the end for his friend, Ash makes the only call he can, ordering a final Razor Leaf in the hope they can end this round in a draw. This is a clever tactic, as having not expected a counterattack mid-flight, Jasmine and Onix are not prepared to respond, meaning they take the full brunt of this hit. Briefly, Ash believes this will be a knockout blow, and while it almost is, the Rock Snake Pokemon just barely manages to remain standing. Though, the same cannot be said of Voltorb, as when he collides with the wall about a foot from his first crater, he slumps into unconsciousness, giving the match to Jasmine. Nonetheless, Ash isn't too worried, as he still has Totodile, a fact he reminds his starter of as he carries him back to the trainer box to watch what will surely be an easy victory with Onix so injured. At least, that is what he thinks until Tyrogue emerges from its ball. Striding forward, the baby Pokemon gives Onix a stern look despite being only 1/14th its size, evidently determined to battle now that the chance for real combat has presented itself. Normally, Ash would be fine with this and would respect his Pokemon's wishes, except in this case, Tyrogue is an infant who has fantasized about battle but never partaken in one, especially not one that his stakes is either unaware of or in its youthful selfishness does not care about since it simply wants this. As a result, Ash attempts to recall it before it can get itself hurt, though before he can, Janina announces the final match to be between Onix and Tyrogue, setting his unchosen final Pokemon in stone. Recognizing how young the Scuffle Pokemon is, Jasmine wastes no time in calling for an Iron Tail, with this causing Ash's heart to jump into his throat, since one hit from something as big as Onix could squash little baby Tyrogue flatter than a pancake. Though demonstrating some of the skill it has picked up from shadowboxing, the fighting type enters that pseudo-meditative state and employs some well-placed footwork to dart out of the way, avoiding any damage. Truthfully, neither Ash nor Jasmine had expected this, though finding the first inklings of hope, the raven-haired boy cheers his friend on, this time giving a command as to how it should dodge when Onix tries again. Like the first attempt, this allows Tyrogue to move out of the way, with Onix looking rather flustered as it stares down at its smaller opponent. Though this is not the only way it looks, as after all the damage it took fighting Voltorb, not to mention the continued effort of swinging at its tiny moving target, the rock ground type seems just about ready to collapse. If he had to guess, Ash figures that one good hit should be enough to knock it out, though how exactly Tyrogue is meant to land such a hit is beyond him, since it could kick and punch the stones making up Onyx's body all day and it probably wouldn't feel a thing. Thankfully, it is Jasmine who gives him the answer, as wanting to help Onyx conserve its remaining energy, she tells it to use Rock Throw so it can take out this little pest from a distance. Roaring its understanding, the Rock Snake Pokemon opens its maw wide and begins belching stones, each larger than Tyrogue itself, which the baby fighter must desperately run, tumble, and weave to avoid. Once again, it is its footwork and focus that saves it, with Ash mostly serving as a second set of eyes to warn it which direction rocks are coming from and when it's safe to move. However, knowing that all this running will do is tire Tyrogue out until Onyx eventually gets a lucky hit, the boy instead decides to take the fight to the gym leader, telling his newest friend to use those fancy feet to jump onto the rock currently sailing towards it. Placing its full trust in the first human it ever saw, Tyrogue leaps, landing on the rock mid-flight, then on Ash's cry, jumping onto the next, with this creating a sort of staircase up towards Onyx's head. Figuring this must be where they're going, Jasmine tells Race to stop using Rock Throw and employ Iron Tail one more time, since there's no way Tyrogue will be able to dodge it in the air. In this, she is quite correct, as Ash does not tell the little fighting type to dodge, instead he commands it to land on the glowing tail. To Jasmine's shock, despite being so young, Tyrogue is able to do this, then taking advantage of the fact that Onyx's tail is bigger and more stable than the falling rocks, the Scuffle Pokemon uses it as its final springboard to jump up and ram a tackle right between the rock ground type's eyes. A moment later, both Pokemon plummet to the ground, with this kicking up a massive cloud of dust that obscures the battlefield. Due to the tenuous nature of the match, both trainers know this could go either way or even end in a tie. As a result, everyone holds their breath as the dust settles. Though, when the two combatants come into view, all assembled see an exhausted but delighted Tyrogue standing atop the head of its vanquished foe, which means in a truly come-from-behind victory, Ash has won his mineral badge. And that's where we'll leave things. What other upset victories will Ash manage to pull off during the next leg of his Johto journey? How formidable will Tyrogue truly be when it's fully grown? And which gym will Ash challenge next now that he has less than half to go? Find out as the journey continues.